So I haven't made a video in a little while, and it's because our John Deere lawnmower, the deck rusted through because they're designed super thin and rust right through. So here's how rotten the D100 deck got before it failed. That bracket's completely detached. And this is rusted all the way through. And if you flip it over, it's just like Swiss cheese. There's more holes all through this, and where the spindles are is just completely rusted through. So we went out and we grabbed up this Craftsman II. It's like a 1986 or 87 model. We grabbed this guy up for $80 with a deck and everything. And I rebuilt the carb. It had a Tecumseh engine in it, little 12 horsepower. And I rebuilt the carb and put some gaskets on it and had it running. And everything was good with this except for I go to start it after I did some of the seals and it shot oil out the bottom. One of the gaskets on the 12 horsepower had failed. So I'll be doing a rebuild on that later. Let me show you what happened with that engine. It's basically on this 12 horsepower Tecumseh. You have the multiple layers to the engine. Basically this layer right here, right underneath where the head was, had sprung a leak and shot oil everywhere. And just because of that, it quit being able to start. It was running beautifully until that seal went. This will be torn down and gone through, but that didn't work out. So I figured not a big deal. We had a D100 and a Craftsman. We could use both of these to make a working mower. So I took the engine off of that and went, hey, I bet if I try hard enough, that'll bolt right onto the Craftsman. Believe it or not, it did. I just swapped out that 12 horsepower Tecumseh for a 17.5 horsepower Briggs. Of course, it's, branded with John Deere, but everything fit here. And I didn't have issues with like where the oil filter was, is like maybe a couple mil before the side panel on the mower. So everything fit nice and pretty underneath the hood. And basically all I did to achieve this was the 12 horsepower had these spacers in between the frame of the tractor and the engine to space it. And then it had one big crankshaft pulley that had the pulley for the deck and the pulley for the engine on the bottom. To get this engine to bolt onto this frame in place, you remove these spacers entirely, and you basically would take the John Deere pulley and bolt off, and you take the bolt and pulley from the Craftsman off and stick it on here. This made the belts line up correctly, where everything's tensioned correct and lines up in a straight line like it's supposed to. And we'll be able to use our deck as well. So now I have to wire all the wiring up for this modern engine and hook up all the fuel system correctly. So the electrical system on the Intek is different than, say, the one on the 12 horsepower Tecumseh engine. This has an alternated system, so you have to hook this one up a bit differently, but I was able to pull this off with a couple of outdoor female connectors. Just hooked up to it, and everything else was ran independently on the engine. I'll throw a diagram up of exactly how I wired this. That way, if anybody needs to, they can reference it. So on this connector, the red wire goes to this red wire, which is coming from your alternator regulator. And then your yellow wire that comes from that goes over and goes to this black wire, which goes to the alternator stator. And then over on this connector, the black wire that comes through goes here, which goes straight to the kill wire that's on your coil. So this goes to your ignition coil to ground it out. So basically this goes to your whole ignition and electric, and this one goes to your kill wire, and the rest of it's self-contained on the engine. The starter hooked up the same, so there's the electric on the starter, comes up, goes over, and goes to starter solenoid, which is back here. Here's the deck that came with it. Basically, I got to take a sledgehammer and beat that dent back out, and then put a couple bolts back in there, and that'll go back on with a new belt. This will be our new grass cutter. So that's coming along, and I'll do some videos on that 12 horsepower when I get to it. This thing's going to be awesome.